Well, good morning, y'all. So we are continuing in our series entitled Secret to Life. We're working our way through, best we can, through Jesus' Sermon on the Mount as found in the Gospel of Matthew, chapters 5, 6, and 7. And in there, Jesus says, look, you want to have a great life. And we looked at the Greek word that he uses there, that makarios. You want to have a blessed life, and not just a blessed life, but a supremely blessed life, the best life you can possibly have. And he begins to strip away all of our preconceived ideas about what we think a successful life looks like. He turns it upside down. And a couple weeks ago, we looked at, Jesus calls us as followers of Jesus to be different, to live counterculturally. There's some expectations there for us to be salt and light in a dark world. And then last week, we looked at the idea of living an agape life, which means that we show up differently than most people, and the fact that we don't judge, we love the unlovely, we give grace to those who we think don't deserve it, and we live our lives in a very gracious way representing Jesus. And so this, right now, I just want to pick it up where we left off last week. So we finished out in chapter 5, moving on to chapter 6, verse 1, and Jesus says this: Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others, to be seen by them. For if you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets to be honored by others. Truly, I tell you, they've received their reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. And then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. So if I were to basically sum it up in a couple sentences what Jesus is talking about, and we can just go home, I would sum it up like this: that Jesus challenges us to have a faith that is authentic through and through. That we live our lives in a generous way. Because in the end, it won't matter about your image or what people may or may not think about you. No matter how hard you try, you can't take it with you. And you can't get ahead when you're dead. So Jesus says, make the most of the opportunity that you have in the here and now, and understand what real life is all about. If you enjoy the music of Westridge, this Saturday night is the Best of Westridge concert, and these guys do an amazing job, so they're putting together a concert for you all, so I hope everybody comes. It's free, and just to be clear, it's not a worship service. It's really, we're doing everything from Tom Petty to Pink Floyd to whatever, so it's a great time to bring friends, neighbors. We turn the cafe into a wine bar and have a real concert. It's family friendly, and hope y'all come and enjoy it and support the musicians. So this Saturday night. All right. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets or put a big old neon flashing sign pointing to yourself, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets to be honored by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. Now, when I read this passage, there's kind of a double meaning that I think that Jesus is kind of running parallel tracks for two messages that he wants to convey. And the first one is that our faith should be authentic. In other words, what we do should be what we do because it's in our heart and not because we're trying to draw attention to ourselves. And then the other one is that we should live generously and we should contribute to those who are in need in a meaningful way. And I hope that as we go through and we move through this message of the Sermon on the Mount, that we begin to see the trend of what Jesus is describing as this Makarios, this supremely blessed life, is that the more we can get away from me, right? The more we can get away from our own self-absorbed life to live a selfish life, and the more we give of ourselves and contribute to others, the greater fulfillment we're going to have. It's a trend all the way through the Sermon on the Mount. And so Jesus says, look, don't give in a way that's lifting you up instead of lifting up the people in need who really need it. Do not lift up your ego. Lift up genuinely the people who need your help. And Jesus feels the need to address this issue of kind of drawing attention to yourself in giving because of what was going on culturally at the time. The religious leaders that we've talked about many times, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, they were like in this almost ridiculous competition with each other to see who could look more religious and who could look more moral and more spiritual. And so they continued to draw attention to themselves in the way that they prayed and the way that they showed up at, temple. And especially now, as Jesus says, describes, is in the way that they give. And so there's this great image of this in the Gospel of Mark, where Jesus is hanging out with the disciples. They're sitting in the temple, and they're near the place where people give their offerings. So back in the day, if you can imagine here at Westridge, we put a big bucket here on stage. I'm going to sit here, and I'm going to watch each and every one of you march to the front and give your offering. I would imagine giving might go up just a little. I don't know that for sure, but it's possible. And so the offering goes in the front, and people would march forward. And there was just like a whole group of people who drew attention to whether they were giving some gold or silver or money, that they would, throw this amount of money in and draw attention to themselves in hopes that people would see them as being ultra religious. And so as Jesus is watching all of this, there's this little poor widow who came up just on her own, walking toward the front to give her offering, and you could just tell that this woman didn't have a thing in the world. And as she's coming forward, surrounded by all these rich people and super religious people, you could almost feel them looking down on her like, what in the world is that gift going to mean in the midst of all that we're giving, right? Like she's not good enough, like her gift is not good enough. And she walks forward and she drops these 2 very small copper coins into the offering. And the Bible says that those coins were worth only pennies by today's standards, but those were the pennies that could buy her next meal. And she gives them up. And so Jesus sees a teaching opportunity to be with his disciples about giving, and so he gathers them together, and Jesus said, honestly, I'm telling you that this poor widow has put more into the offering than all the others put together. They all gave out of their wealth, but she gave out of her poverty and put everything in. It was all in, everything she had. That passage, I hope, paints a clear picture of God's expectation of our giving, that it has nothing to do with the amount of money that we give or how big the gift is that we're capable of giving. That passage paints a very clear picture to me that giving is about being all in. It's about giving that comes from the heart. It's not proud, it's humble. Because sacrificial giving is when we are so overwhelmed with love and gratitude to God that we give an extravagant amount of money that is meaningful to me. So $10 to me may be different than $10 to you. $100 to me may be a whole different thing for you. And that poor widow was so overwhelmed by the love of God that she sacrificed everything to give out of a sense of gratitude. And that is the whole point of the way that Bible teaches about giving. That when we let go of our money, that when we are finally able to just let it go and to give it away, it keeps our hearts in check as to what's really important to us in this life. Right? I mean, it's a weekly reminder that all we work so hard for, in the end, will not last. As Michael said so beautifully, you can't put a trailer hitch on the back of a hearse, right? I mean, it helps us to let go of the things that are so important to us now, but in the end will have no value. So you may have noticed that during the offering time here at Westridge, we use that as a teaching time as well, because we say all the time, if you're not in a relationship with God, if your life hasn't been changed by the radical love of God, if you haven't received God's grace, then don't give. Because really giving is as a response to that. So we don't want you to give out of a sense of obligation or guilt. We want you to continue to come to Westridge and to grow in your relationship with God. But if you're not at that place, don't give, which is pretty radical for a lot of people who really believe that all the church wants is my money. But when you look at a place like Westridge, which is mostly full of volunteers who are doing what they do because they love Jesus, and the staff has made financial sacrifices to work here as a paid staff member, it's because of their love and passion for Jesus Christ. It has nothing to do with money. And in spite of the fact that we have to, make the mortgage payment and pay for the electric bill and the Elgin water bill, which is never cheap, we've made a commitment here that we'll never stand in front of you and say, hey, things are tight now, please give more, because we're concerned about being able to make the bills. That's not, I don't think you've ever heard that in the 21-year history of Westridge. We really believe that what you give is between you and God, and you should be compelled to give as a result of what you believe in your heart, not out of some guilt trip that we make. And so the idea of giving really is very simple. That we are so filled up with gratitude for the grace of God, for our Makarios life, the way that we have been supremely blessed by God, that we just have to do something. And so as a result of that, we give out of an overflow and abundance of joy in our lives. I gotta tell you, something happened to me this week in the business world. I was just giddy because it had been emotionally draining for me for 8 months. It finally culminated in a really positive way. And all I wanted to do is to give a special gift this morning to just say thank you. And out of the gratitude for the way that God has blessed me. And so that's the idea of it, that it's something that we do because we have a desire to do it. We want to do it, not because we have to do it. And so there's this contrast that's really set up, that Jesus sets up, where there's a giving out of our abundance of wealth. In other words, that we give out of our surplus cash flow, almost like a tip. It's yeah, I can afford that, and so I'll throw that in the offering bag as it goes around because I can afford to do that. Or giving out of an abundance of joy that says, no matter how much money I have or don't have on hand, it doesn't matter. I'm going to give an amount that is meaningful to me because whether in good times or in bad, I'm committed to this thing with Jesus, and I have a Makarios life because of the way that God has blessed me and forgiven me, and I can live in His grace. He goes on, he says, but when you give to the needy, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Now, I think that Jesus kind of takes and swings the pendulum almost to the other side, because there was such a movement of people who were drawing attention to themselves in giving that he's hey, cut it, man. That's not the way we do this. But what I really think that he's preaching here is the idea that when we give to somebody in need, we do it in an authentic way. We're not doing it to lift ourselves up. We're not doing it to, you see these big galas and you have people's names and what they've given to this or that, and it's all in lights because they've given this big check, and that does not matter to Jesus. Jesus really believed in something that we call incarnational ministry, which means that Jesus was present. He wasn't just there to hand something out to somebody. He was present in the life of the person who was in need. He built a friendship with them. He was in relationship with them. He shared a meal. He was involved. He got his hands dirty. He hugged people with leprosy and diseases, and he was all about authentically helping people in need to empower them to change their lives. I mean, in every case, you look at Jesus says, go and do that no more. Go and sin no more. Go and be different. Go and change your life. And we have that same philosophy of ministry here at Westridge, where we believe in empowerment versus enablement. In other words, we want to give a hand up rather than a hand out. And we want to make sure that we don't enable somebody to stay in a victim position to the point that they are never empowered to get up on their own 2 feet and rise above their circumstance to live the life that God has for them. We would be naive to believe that there's a lot of people out there who haven't been dealt a bad hand. And rather than just put a Band-Aid on that, we can help them to overcome that circumstance, to rise up and to be empowered to have a different quality of life where they have the tools to do that on their own. I would equate that to having a 30-year-old child who is still living in my basement, right? And he's has his mom washing his clothes, and he gets free meals and a little gas money, and he goes, I got a good life, man. What's like the point of him ever moving out of that basement, right? I mean, he's got a pretty posh life. That's what enablement looks like, rather than empowering him to like, here's some gas money, now go and find a stinking job, right? And do it on your own and get out of the house. So the same thing holds true in outreach, that when we give handouts to people, when we're just putting a Band-Aid on something, and we never help that person to overcome their circumstance because they get caught in the cycle of wanting one handout after another, after another, after another, and never really improving the underlying circumstances that they're facing. And so we want to empower rather than enable by contributing back to their lives. And the problem is, I think for us a lot of times, is that a lot of us don't give to those in need because we're afraid we're being taken advantage of, or they're going to go and buy drugs, right? Or they're going to go and smoke it, or that we are going to enable them. And so then we do nothing. And that's wrong too, because Jesus tells us to do something, right? And so what we've done here at Westridge is to try and create a safe outreach strategy to give everyone the opportunity to be able to, in a safe way, live generously and do incarnational ministry as a lifestyle to make an impact on the people who are really in need, and empower those people to stand on their own 2 feet to have a better quality of life. And so I think that we've been executing this plan over the last few years, and it's been working really well. And it's really a 3-pronged approach, and we have so many new people. I'm going to just give a quick overview of what that looks like. So our first target is the people of Westridge. All right, we have people who come to this church on a Sunday morning that you sit next to, who find themselves at one time or another, who find themselves in need. And so we want to be able to support them and empower them and encourage them. And whether they've fallen into a time of need financially, or they've lost a loved one, or there's health issues, or they've lost a job, whatever it is. And so over the years, we've developed teams of people here at Westridge who intervene, who do incarnational ministry and really help in that point of crisis to be able to make a difference. And the biggest one I think that we have is we have the compassion team. And the compassion team, when somebody's in crisis, we help provide meals. We help them financially if they need financial help. We provide them transportation, hospital visits, whatever it is. We want to just have an all-encompassing, and there's different groups of people that even do cards and send cards when people have a time of loss. So there's a lot of different ways to get involved on a lot of different levels. The second strategy is that we have to get beyond our own four walls as a church, right? We don't want to be selfish as a church either, or to be self-absorbed as a church, and so we want to look outside of the walls of Westridge and make a difference. And so the next area that we look at is the city of Elgin. This was really a perplexing thing for a long time, because if you're going to do incarnational ministry, if you're really going to be present in the lives of the people you're making a difference in, it's challenging in this economy to be able to do something meaningful. And so when the opportunity arose with Huff Elementary, and for those of you who don't know, Huff Elementary School is in the most impoverished neighborhood of the city of Elgin. And in 2011, there was a teacher that was attending Westridge, and she made us aware of the needs of Huff. And so we started doing a little bit at a time and building a relationship with the teachers and the administration and the kids. And there was such an overwhelming response, we decided to go all in. So our ministry here in Elgin really focuses around Huff Elementary. And so now that partnership with Huff has grown to the point that we provide food over holiday breaks. We do coat drives for kids who can't afford winter coats. We have a group of people that pack backpacks for the kids full of food so that they could take it home for the weekend and have food for those who are in need. This year, we've also started doing after-school activities for the kids, because a lot of the kids have nobody to go home to. They're going home to an empty house, and so we do activities. We have a group of volunteers that play games and sports and stuff with kids after school. Last year was this really cool thing. We called it a toy drive, but it's like way beyond a toy drive. This church gets converted into a mall for needy parents, for parents who can't afford to buy their kids Christmas gifts. And so we ask all of you to bring slightly used toys as a donation. And then we have a group of volunteers, which we need volunteers for this year's toy drive, to set up this whole thing like a store. And literally, moms and dads come in and shop for their kids and get them really cool toys and books that they wouldn't normally be able to afford. And now they have a great, meaningful Christmas. And so you'll hear more about that as the time grows closer. And then we also have a mentor program where we want to emotionally support kids who are in crisis. A lot of them are in bad family situations. And so Susie Geltner will be at guest services, I think, today. If you're interested in doing that, you can find out more about that. But there's a lot of opportunities there, is my point, where you can get involved in working for the least of these. And then beyond that, we have several groups of people who are involved in the homeless situation here in Elgin. And so there's no need to reinvent the wheel, and so we partner with PADS, and we partner with the Vineyard Church and Wayside to provide meals. And you can get involved by doing that once a month. And so there's opportunities there. The last thing I'll talk about is just the third target is more of an international one, and it's in Nicaragua. I really struggled for years to figure out how to do incarnational ministry internationally for impoverished areas. And so my wife and I were getting ready to buy a second home, and we switched and we made a decision to buy a second home in Nicaragua instead of in California. And we wanted to live among the people of Nicaragua, to be involved in the community, to build relationships, to build friendships, which has been happening over the last several years. And now the ministry that we're doing there, called Nika Angels, has now been adopted as a ministry of Westridge. And all of you have now taken ownership of that, which is really awesome. And so Nika Angels is involved in three primary areas. The first one is in the area of education. We have work groups that go into the schools, and we'll rehab schools because the Nicaraguan government isn't putting money back into schools. So we help with that. We'll build kitchens so that kids can have hot meals. We'll do computer labs so they can have an enhanced learning experience, so we're improving in that way. We're also involved in clean water. There's a lot of families in Nicaragua that don't have access to clean water. Their kids have diarrhea every day of their lives because they don't have access to a clean water source. And so we'll go in to a neighborhood that we know needs clean water, we'll drill a well, and it is absolutely life-changing. And the last one is near and dear to my heart, just from the business world, is sustainable economic development. And so we mentor young people and also professionals in their businesses and help them to be entrepreneurs, to start businesses, but to make their own livings. And so whether it's a micro loan to a fisherman whose motor broke down and he can't provide for his family, or a group of surfers to open up their own business, we want to be able to help to create economic development for them. Again, it's not a hand out where we're putting a Band-Aid in a situation, it's a hand up where we're empowering them to take ownership of their own lives, to work hard, and to create something that's sustainable. And then the last thing is my wife, Shelby, has started one of the largest sea turtle preserves in Central America. And it's called Sacred Sand. And so taking care of God's creatures, and it's really cool experience as we are in the middle of releasing turtles right now. Now, for those of you who don't know, Nicaragua is in a pretty bad state of political distress. I've had a lot of people ask me about this, and this year we ended up unfortunately having to cancel our work trips because of the violence that has broken out there that is backed by the government. But what I want you to know that it has not stopped our work down there, and it has not stopped our support of the people down there. And so our workers in Nika Angels wanted to send all of you a message, and so they did it through the form of a video. So if we could play that video.
La verdad que Nica Ángel para nosotros ha sido un amigo, un hermano, porque en todo momento ha estado a la par de nosotros, no nos ha dejado a pesar de cómo está la situación en nuestro país. Pero sí, nosotros estamos bien agradecidos, los niños están bien agradecidos también, al igual que los padres de familia, porque ha sido un gran beneficio que nos ha traído a nuestra comunidad. Muchas gracias, Nica Ángel, y Dios los bendiga.
Nica Ángel ha sido una gran bendición para estas comunidades, para estos pueblos, para nuestros hijos, para nuestra familia, por los trabajos y por los proyectos que hemos hecho. Y para mí en lo personal es una gran bendición poder trabajar en los proyectos que se han hecho en las iglesias, colegios y tantas cosas que hemos venido haciendo en las comunidades que están legítimamente olvidadas de otros proyectos. Pero Nica Ángel sí se ha dado la oportunidad para que nuestros hijos, nuestra familia, podamos compartir y aprender hacia un futuro mejor.
Hello, Westridge. Greetings from Nicaragua. I would like to talk about the situation in Nicaragua in the past 4 months. That it's been, as many of you guys know, it's been critical here. But thanks to your support, we have been able to keep going and keep helping the schools, and our work hasn't stopped. And as many of the other nonprofits that were in the area, they left, but we're still here. As you can see in the back, we're starting another project in Tamborcito School, and all this is thanks to you and your support. Thanks a lot.
All that footage was taken recently, and so the meals that were shown with the kids, we continue to support the schools in making sure the kids get a hot meal. The work groups were supposed to do the project in Tamborcito, but our workers are carrying on that since our teams weren't able to go. But it's we always want them to feel respected and dignified and never abandoned. Like, even in the midst of this political turmoil where we haven't been able to get down there, we still continue to support them financially and emotionally and do whatever we can. We have our Wine to Water event coming up November 10th, where this room gets converted to a big wine tasting event. And so that event really is the one event of the year that we have to support the Nika Angels, and so we hope you come to that. It's a fun night, and it'll be great. So those are the three strategies that we've really done and really focused in on, and I feel like it gives everybody the opportunity to be able to do incarnational ministry and to be empowered to get involved. So there's really no excuses, and I can go on and on. There's probably 30 other opportunities that I don't have the time to even mention. We're doing a vision night tonight, so if you're new to Westridge, you want to know more about the church, 6 o'clock in the cafe, doing a very casual event. You can just show up to that, get more information. It's just Q&A, and I'm going to do a very short presentation to talk about some of the vision of the church. But, the whole point is that when we started this church, Sermon on the Mount was really one of those driving forces where we just wanted a group of people who just want to live authentically for Jesus. And we're far from perfect. We're far from being, perfect religiously or look great spiritually or a bunch of super Christians, because we're so not. We fail over and over. But we're a group of people who are on this narrow dirt path that leads to Jesus, and we all just want to make a difference and love God and have this Makarios life. And there's an authenticity about that and a sincerity about that we love, The least of these that Jesus describes, they don't have a voice. And really what it is we're helping people to have a voice who can't speak for themselves. These people who don't have a shot, that just having somebody in their corner to root them on, to be a cheerleader, to say that we love you and we're here for you and we haven't abandoned you, and somebody gives a rip about them. That's incarnational ministry. I'll just tell you this quick story and I'll be done. One of the coolest things, happened last week, where a friend of mine was over, we were having a glass of wine, and he just said that he had a situation where his neighbor up at his lake house in Wisconsin was dying of cancer, and they brought in hospice, and his last request, so I guess he goes over and smokes cigars with his neighbor all the time, and so this guy's last request was he wanted to smoke a cigar, for that time. So I was actually able to give him some Nicaraguan cigars that we'd gotten down there, and he went up and had a time with this guy, and he said it was just the coolest thing, where we sat there, we smoked cigars that night, we talked about what real life is all about, and hugged him, told him I loved him, and that night, that guy died. And that is what incarnational ministry looks like. It's just, you don't have to have anything right to say. You don't have to have the words. It's just a matter of being present with somebody who is in need, where we just give love and dignity and respect and know that gosh, we just love them with the love of Jesus. And no matter what they've been through, no matter what they've done, that we give them grace and agape, that we just love them with God's love. It's going to come a day, we talk about it all the time, and I don't want to brush past it, when we stand before God. And on that day, I don't want to say, but Jesus, when did I ever see you hungry? When did I ever see you thirsty and not give you something to drink? I never saw you. But instead, that we turn that around And we just live by this mantra. Whatever it is that I do, even into the least of these, I've done it unto Jesus.